And now the recording started and my CPU is not on fire. Let's talk about what we're actually doing here today. Okay, so I'm not entirely sure how much population we've had in the last few weeks, or even how much people remember from the last few weeks. So let's talk a little bit about what we saw all the way back during Lecture 2 and 4. Lecture 2 notes, Lecture 4 notes. So, Lecture 2, we were talking Java identifiers, Java data types, control flow, if statements, switch case, and eventually getting down into loops. All of these things will make a return today with a bit more context and content to them, and a few more uses for them. Lecture 4 mentioned public, private, and protected access types. I'll touch upon those again in another context. And then talked a whole bunch about the idea of how to build a class. That is not an explicit topic of the day. However, it is tangentially related to the fact that I mentioned that we were going to be talking about the keyword static later on. So let's go right into where we are now. Oh good, we've got more people now. So, what is an array? So we're used to dealing with, we're not used to dealing with, so what we've talked about in the past so far here is the idea of single variables, where one variable has one type, holds one value. And you get, and in Java, because you must declare your types on your variables, you have an int called number, integer. That lets you store one number. But what if you want to store more numbers? You could say, just start declaring more variables and just call them more numbers, but at some point that's a solution that doesn't scale up, and it gets clumsier the further you get into it. So let's not talk about that. Let's talk about the Java lecture should not be audio only. It should be video included, and it should be streaming a Google Chrome window right now. If you're not seeing that, I'm not sure what's up. Is there like maybe Discord streaming in a browser is a little bit unreliable? Disconnect, reconnect, and does work a lot for a lot of problems. It's kind of amusing like that. So, or the extension to this one, what if you don't even know how many variables you might need? You know you'll need to store a whole bunch of integers, but you don't know exactly how many integers you'll need. So, let's talk about arrays. So, the array it's a basic part of the Java language. It's a basic part of a lot of languages, honestly. So, an array is if you think of a variable as a single box of a specific shape, an array is a shelf that can hold a lot of boxes all that shape. And arrays are declared by adding a pair of square brackets after a variable type. You can make an array out of any data type, but as with variables, the type of the array must be declared when the array is created. And also, as with variables, the data stored within an array must match the type. In order to actually create the array, though, it's a little bit more than just saying type name equals value. In order to actually create an array, you need to do something that you probably saw in the last 2 weeks, which is you use the keyword new. And when you're creating an array, you must give it a size. And that size is the exact number of objects that the array can hold. Or, if not objects, the exact number of individual data elements the array can hold. And you could type in a straight up number there, or you could use a variable for that. Depends on the context you're working in. If you just know how big the array is going to be, then you can just type in a number. But a lot of the time, you're going to wind up using another variable to define how big the array is. Once you've set how big the array is, you cannot change how big it is. In order to change the size of the array, you basically need to wipe out the old array and create a new array from scratch. Now you can do that, but it's a little bit awkward because in order to not lose all of the old array data, you need to copy the old array into the new array. And speaking of copying arrays into new arrays, I mentioned that for loops are going to come back. Well, we love using for loops to deal with arrays. It's really, really easy to work with a for loop in an array. To work with an array in a for loop. I promise I know how to speak English. So let's see doing that. So actually, no, let's not talk about how to do an array with a for loop. Let's talk about how to do anything with an array. So, as I said, an array is a shelf of boxes rather than a single box. So how do you get to a single box on the shelf? Arrays are numbered. Every position in an array has a number. In order to get to a given position in an array, you start with the array's variable name, and you give it a position number. Arrays start their position counting at 0. So the very first item in an array is at position 0. This might be a little bit off-putting to people who are humans and are used to starting counting at 1, but there is an underlying reason that goes back to the early days of memory management, and I could talk more about that if you like, but if you don't need that explanation in the moment, then we can just say that keep in mind that in Java, arrays start counting at 0. And in most programming languages, arrays start counting at 0. And one day you will bump into a language that starts its array counting at 1, Lua, or R, and you will suddenly be very thrown off, because who starts counting at 1 these days? This is programming. Cries in MATLAB. Yeah. Java tries to be a bit more traditional, though, so Java starts counting arrays at 0. And you can say type correct. You can say get the variable name right. Modulo operations when starting arrays at 1. Yeah, that's another nightmare. So you can do, when you're putting values into an array, you can do it the same way you put values into regular variables. But that quickly bumps into the same problem that I mentioned earlier with it getting unwieldy, and what if you don't know how big your array is exactly? What if you just know you have a bunch of stuff in the array? So, let's talk for loops again. We've also talked about, back when we were talking for loops originally, we said we liked to set up for loops by starting our loop variable counter at 0. Well, this is a callback to that, because arrays like it when you start at 0. But arrays then also have a very nice feature to them, where Java arrays know how big they are. And every Java array has a property to it called length. And so by saying that the name of the array .length, that will give you how long the array is. So because int array was created with a size of 5, int array.length will give you 5. Oh, we love playing with loops. The other thing about the array being of size 5 and the array starting at 0 is that starting at 0, size 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 positions in the array. What happens if you try to type in What happens if you try to go to position 5 in the array? Well, at that point, you fall off the end of the array, and the Java compiler gets very annoyed at you if you try to do that. It doesn't allow you to... in Java, you're not allowed to try to fall off the end of an array. It gives you an error message called the array index out of bounds exception. Which, fortunately, it's very straightforward that it tells you that. So that if you get a place where you see array index out of bounds exception, it should be fairly obvious what exactly went wrong, namely you fell off the array. Other languages like most of the C family, you might not be so lucky, so it's still always a good idea, no matter what language you're in, to always know how big your arrays are and not try to fall off the end of the array. Okay, so these two blocks of code would let you put stuff into an array. How do you pull stuff out of an array? Same way you'd pull stuff out of a normal variable. With variables, we just have the name of the variable, but with arrays, we have the name of the variable and its position number. Int array 0 contains a 1. And just for fun, exception in thread main, array index out of bounds exception at index 5, out of bounds for length 5. Yeah. Vivaldi is a browser. Yeah, yep, Vivaldi is a browser. I've never actually seen it used, but I know it's a browser. Chrome made by the Opera folks. Does it change with the seasons? Bad pun of the day is bad. Array index out of bounds. Array is a shelf. Indexes. Loops through arrays. So let's talk about a case where you might not know how big the array is going to be. Let's talk about what if we want to, let's say that we want the user to type in a whole big string of numbers to us, and once we've gotten that whole big string of numbers, we want to see what the sum of all those numbers is. So, how do we do each of those different things? Well, because arrays are fixed size, the first thing we have to do is ask the user how many numbers they're going to type in. And the 0th thing we need to do is set ourselves up to get user input. Scanner input new scanner system.in. How many numbers do you want added up? in.nextInt. Now, knowing how many numbers there are going to be, we can create ourselves our array of numbers. And let's let them use decimals for this. Because I mentioned that you can make an array of any type, let's make an array of doubles this time. And you don't need to have the word array in the name of an array. I'm just putting it there because it's obvious. And when you're creating an array, whatever variable or whatever number goes into the array size, that must be an integer, and it must be a positive integer. I believe technically you are allowed to create an array of size 0, however, there's very little meaning in doing so, and you're definitely not allowed to create a negative sized array. So, we've asked the user the question, we've gotten their answer how many numbers, and we've created our array to hold that many numbers. So now we need to get all those numbers. Set up a for loop. Next int has to be capitalized. So, for loop that runs number count times, ask the user for a number, get the number. And then just to make sure that we're doing something, let's just print out the contents of the array as we're getting it once we got it all so that we can see that something happened properly. Yes, video does work with the Discord app. Discord app is nice. Discord app is your friend. Let's not give myself more existential crises. System out print. Number. So let's just make sure we haven't done anything too ridiculous so far. Let's see if we haven't annoyed the compiler yet. It's always bad if the compiler's annoyed at you. Don't annoy your compiler. The compiler just wants to be your friend. I annoyed the compiler. Why did I annoy the compiler? Because when I tried to create the double array number array, I didn't actually declare it as an array. How many numbers do we want to add up? Oh, let's add 7 numbers. Why not? 13. 28.7. 9. 180 billion. I wonder what happens if you turn the word shrimp into a number. And so, we type in 7 numbers, we get out 7 numbers. But oh no, they were numbered 1 through 6. Welcome to starting counting at 0. So now, let's add up the numbers instead. And for loops can be pretty much copy-pasted as at will because they're nice like that. The audience are alive, correct? Like, there's a dozen humans that I'm allegedly talking to. Am I actually having humans listen to me? Or is everyone still playing, like, video games? Ah, okay. So, MGR Sari is dead. That shouldn't surprise me very much. Suvan might be dead. Jasmine's dead. Okay, so that's 3 people confirmed dead. How many people do we have that are confirmed alive? Oh, okay, Mikdor's a bot. I mean, I'm also a bot, but, like, what does that prove? Does that prove I'm not alive, huh? Huh? How many numbers do we gotta add up? Let's only add 6 this time. So, what happens when you add 61, negative 0.71, 88.888, 14, 3, and negative 999? Negative 832.822. Well, that seems reasonable enough. I'm dead too, dead inside. To me IRL, for me IRL. Is that the meme these kids are using these days? What am I saying? I am one of the kids. Okay. So, out of the lines of code written so far, how many of them make no sense at all? This is float too, right? Why is there no 0.0000001 at the end? So, floating point numbers, float and double, are both stored as effectively exponential notation, and rounding errors happen. Because I've only gone like 3 decimal points in, the rounding errors haven't become obvious yet. Or maybe I've just chosen good numbers that don't have massive roundings problems with them. But yes, float and double are a little bit prone to having a big long string of 0.00001 at the end of the decimal. There's a way around that, but as for why there's no 0.00001 at the end right now, luck. It sells some plus equals. Okay, so if you're not familiar with the plus equals operator, so plus equals is a shorthand operator. And plus equals it's a shorthand for saying variable equals variable plus whatever's on the right side. And we like the plus equals operator because it allows us to get away with doing simple like sum addition type things much more compactly than having to type full variable name equals variable name plus thing to add in. WebDev Suvan has been typing a lot to me, hasn't they? Student array, this class equals new student 9. Is living. All false. Error 3.1 Java class interface or enum expected. So that would be an issue all the way up at the top. Can you paste in the first like 5 lines of your file into Discord chat? I mean, I think you're missing a semicolon or you're missing a keyword somewhere. Class interface or enum expected. And it doesn't like your package very much, does it? Like the fact that it's giving the error message on line 3 means that it doesn't like the package declaration. I mean, what we're dealing with right here, packages aren't relevant, so we can just avoid dealing with the not with the thing that it doesn't like packages. Oh yeah, that's true. That package would go before import. So if you jump line 3 up to line 1, it'll probably be a lot happier. WebDev Suvan and Hero are topping. Now there's 5 errors. This is just getting worse. This is getting out of hand. Now there are 5 of them. Welcome to programming. The compile. I made a joke about be nice to the compiler, but let's be honest, the compiler hates you. The compiler hates all of us. So, what all errors do you have today? Hopefully, it's the good sort of errors where, like, the error where it the class interface or enum expected error message was just hiding all the actual errors. We call those the good kind of errors because the good kind of errors actually tell you something. Class interface or enum expected doesn't tell you very much. Incompatible types. Double array cannot be converted to double. Array required but double found. Array required double found. Array required double found. Array required double found. Okay, so you've got the last 4 of those arrays are all the same error message, and so what's going to be relevant is it's what's going on line 30. So let's take a look at what's going on line 30. What's probably happening is that the same mistake that I made originally, where you created the double array with a size to it, but you might not have actually. Yes, it's exactly what I was thinking of. So you created the double array with your given number count, but you didn't actually declare the double array to be a double array. The brackets need to be on the type as well as being on the new side. Yeah, I like that. Yay! No more error messages. Okay. Okay, we are 40 minutes in right now. Okay, so what do we want to talk about now? Do we want to come up with something new to talk about with an array? Do we want to talk about the other magical type of for loop, or do we want to move on to one of the other listed topics, such as the keyword static? Because I know the static keyword has come up a fair bit, but I don't know if it's been thoroughly discussed. Rohan is typing. "2D arrays! That's a good one! Okay, so. No, I was overlooking something. So. Okay, so. 2-dimensional arrays. In their simplest and most confusing form, a 2-dimensional array is an array made out of arrays. Okay, what the hell does that mean? So, if you take an array as a shelf of boxes some distance long, an array of arrays would be like, you ever go to a library and you see like there's just rows and rows of bookshelves, and each shelf of books has a number on it, and each book inside the shelf has a number on it. So that's a very good like visual representation of a multi-dimensional array. 2D arrays are like spreadsheets. Yeah, you can see a spreadsheet as a two-dimensional array that you have for visual purposes. You have one of the two array parameters is rows, and one of the two array parameters is columns. So a two-dimensional array has where a one-dimensional array is a row of stuff, a two-dimensional array is a bunch of rows and a bunch of columns of stuff, length and width. Matrix brain. If you're going to declare a matrix, you would declare it like a 2D array, but so how do you declare a multi-dimensional array? And arrays are not limited to 2 dimensions. Arrays can have any number of dimensions to them. It's just that once you go past 2 dimensions, it's pretty much more of the same. So how do we declare a multi-dimensional array? By adding more brackets. More confusion. How do you declare a 2D array? You evaluate why you needed a 2D array to begin with. Well, sometimes you're stuck in environments where they force you to use multidimensional arrays, and there's kind of no way around that one. Yeah, like I was like 5D arrays could be a little bit excessive. 3D arrays you can come up with valid uses for in the form of because we see the world in 3 dimensions. Space-time tensor calculations. I'm tempted to say leave your C++ propaganda out of this, even though I know that's not C++ propaganda. I'm going to call it C++ propaganda anyway. So, 2-dimensional array has 2 sets of square brackets on it to indicate it's a 2D array. And then when it's created, you need to give it 2 size numbers. One for the row and one for the row size and one for the column size, for how many rows there are and how many columns there are. Which one's rows and which one's columns, it really doesn't matter, actually. The compiler doesn't care, so just whichever makes more sense to you. I think it's usually like the first one is the row number and the second one's the column number. But let's be honest. The Java compiler doesn't know what a row or a column is, so why does it care? So how do we put something into a 2-dimensional array? Well, first you need to give it a row number. And second, you need to give it a column number. And how would we print out a 2-dimensional array? Well, that one gets a little bit more complicated, and that's one, the only sensible way to do it is with doing a for loop within a for loop. For the outer for loop, I is less than 2D array.length, I++, that makes sense. But for the inner for loop, things are going to get a little bit more interesting. First off, we're using J rather than I. Okay, that's actually meaningless. So what's the big difference here? For the initial for loop going through 2D array.length, that'll get us through all of the first part. But for going through the second part, because the first and second parts, because the row and the columns of the array don't match, the first for loop has to go through how big the row is. The second loop has to go through how big the column is. And in order to know how big a column of the array is, like I said when I started confusingly, a two-dimensional array is an array made out of arrays. That's how it has to work when you're writing a for loop to go through a multi-dimensional array. Why do we use I, J, and K for nested for loops? Is it tradition? Yeah, it's tradition because programmers are lazy. Why don't I put spaces around operators? Is it a Java thing? It's not a Java thing, it's a, me not wanting to type the extra spaces thing. The Java compiler doesn't care about having spaces versus not having spaces between operators. If you prefer, I could go and put spaces in between the operators, but when I'm just typing on my own, I don't put spaces in between the operators because I can't be bothered to punch the spacebar that many times. Like I said, programmers are lazy. So we're trying to print out a two-dimensional array. First off, let's just comment out all of this one-dimensional array stuff because we don't need it for now. And let's spell the variable name correctly. So, as you'll notice, this looks kind of like a matrix or a spreadsheet, that you have 4 rows where each row has 6 columns. And then at position 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, or 1, 4 more accurately, we have the 6 that I put in there. Now, why did I do this jonky thing with double for loops, ij, and the new line on the next line? So, two-dimensional arrays, they have 2 index numbers to them. You need to select a row number and select a column number in order to get an item out of the array. And then you add a space because you don't want everything to be all jumbled together. Unless you do want it to be all jumbled together. I don't know, you might. But then as for having the print statement, having the print line statement outside of the inner loop, so the outer loop runs once for each row of the array. The inner loop runs once for each column of the array. Running once for each column of the array lets us print out all the numbers, but adding the new line at the end of the row lets you add the new line at the end of the row. I feel like I was supposed to say something more, less anticlimactic than that. Where are two-dimensional arrays good? Well, a lot of games exist in 2 dimensions. And so the game board could be a two-dimensional array where each space in the array is whatever piece is on the board. You could model a chess game with a two-dimensional array representing the board, and each space within the array could be blank, or it could be the piece that's on the board. How do we think of exactly the same answer? I don't know. Humans play chess. I actually haven't played like legit chess in years though, and I was never any good at it back when I did play. 11:53. Three people are typing. If one more person started typing, we would get to the several people are typing phase in Discord chat. Tic-tac-toe in Python, 2D array. Yep. That's another good one. I know a couple of professors who tried to use write the full game of tic-tac-toe as a project for a college class at one point. That was not a fun project, because like rules are annoying. But yeah, 2D array as game board underlying, yeah, good stuff. 2D array as like a maze also works, where you can have you can draw up a 2D array, and you can have every space in the array be simply a Boolean value, true false, of whether or not that space is open or that space is a wall, and you could then make a game out of trying to find your way through the maze. How to change a value in an array once you've given a position a value. Same way you gave it, the same way you gave it a value to begin with. So, because arrays work exactly like variables, the content of an array is not fixed. Like when you create the array, everything in the array starts out at 0 or null or whatever. And yes, when you create an array, every item in the array is given some sort of initial value. For arrays made out of primitive data types like integers, every value in the array starts at 0. For object arrays, because you can make arrays out of anything, you could make arrays out of strings. For object arrays, every position in the array starts out as null. But because because an array is just a whole bunch of variables all clustered together under one name, you change values stored in an array the same way you change values stored in a variable. You just go to that position in the array and give it a new value. There's no advanced scientific techniques required to change the contents of an array once the array has already been set up. Shove a 6 into the array, reshove a 7 into the array, shove a 7 into the array. Okay. A person was typing, but then they stopped typing. A person is typing again. 2D array.length returns the length returns the number of rows. It returns the first of the two array length values. In order to get the length of the second value, you'd need to do 2D array brackets 0 dot length. So in our case, 2D array dot length would return 4, and 2D array bracket 0 dot length would return 6. Whoa. Where'd all my code go? Ah, yes, always back up your work. Always a good lesson. Apparently, the website thinks that it's saving, but it seems to have gone into a mild panic for a second. Control S intensifies. More like F5 intensifies at this point. Oh, F5 doesn't work. Let's reload the site manually. Okay, so hash tables or hash maps that is a thing in Java. There is a built-in hash map class. However, that's in collections, and that is very, very much more in the realm of objects or dictionaries. Like, the idea of a hash map exists in Java, but it's not a simple primitive concept. It's not a simple primitive component of the language the way that a array or a multidimensional array is. All right, press F to pay respects to the hero. Okay. So, is there anything really big in arrays that I haven't mentioned so far here? We are now at 1900. We've been going for 1 hour here. By the schedule, we have another 30 minutes. And hopefully, I'd like to see how many people are typing messages to me first. 3D arrays as well, yes. You can have any number of dimensions on an array. So you can have any number of dimensions on an array. It just gets more and more unwieldy the more dimensions you add on. If you're doing things like OpenGL graphics work, then you deal with three-dimensional arrays a lot, but we're not there. And also, that's not Java, that's C. Push and shift. So Java arrays are fixed length, and Java arrays are still sort of kind of primitive type things. So push and shift are not, they're not operators that exist on Java arrays. They would exist on some of the more collection type things like the Java array list, but that's not the topic of the moment. Who's giving C propaganda? Mikdor, as usual. Because he always shows up to give C propaganda. Well, C++ propaganda. It is his purpose. Alright, So on the arrays are fixed length thing, let's take a moment to let's go all back up to that original int array, and let's talk about how you would change the size of an array. You can't really change the size of an array in Java. In order to do it, you would need to create a new array of a new size, you'd need to create a new array of a new size, and then you'd want to copy the old array into the new array. This isn't necessary. I seem to have fallen outside of main. Hold up a minute. This isn't exactly the something that we love doing a whole lot, though. So we usually we like it when we know how big the array is going to be, and we can just create the array and leave it. But if you're in a situation where you need to change the size of an existing array, then you would need to do it by creating a brand new array, copying the old array into the new array, and then, yeah. Array concepts are, okay, so let's scroll into chat again, not now. Push and pop exist in Java. Push and pop are, the push and pop operations exist on collections. Arrays are not collections. Collections are more advanced thing. Arrays more like Python tuples. Like even a tuple has. I mean, I guess you could say that an array is kind of like a tuple, like with the mutable contents but fixed size. Dynamic sized arrays. There are structures for that in collections. Array list, tuples are immutable. Okay, never mind. I haven't looked at Python in years, so ignore any advice I have on Python. Other than Python is an easy language to get into. Tuples are very special. Yes, they are. Okay, so arrays are not a whole lot like tuples then. So dynamic sized arrays. So there are classes within the Java Collections framework for that, namely the array list class and the vector class. Once again, those are collections, and collections are not the topic of the day. Array list versus vector, they're pretty much the same thing, though. It's just that one of them works in multi-threading and the other one doesn't. But yes, those are okay. How to remove duplicates from an array? That is a thing that. So that's a problem to solve. The Java array itself doesn't include a way of doing that on its own. So you could. No, never mind. You probably have to. Yeah, you probably have to just write up your own solution to try to do that. So, how would we write up a solution to? Yeah, there's a set class in collections, but we're not there. So, how would we solve the question of removing the duplicate members of an array? Well, in order to do that, we'd need to, first off, figure out how many unique things there are in the array, and second off, only keep those, and third off, reduce the size of the array so as to remove all the empty space at the end of it. Because we're going to be creating a new, if we're going to be removing duplicates, then we're going to be creating effectively empty space at the end of the array, and we're going to need to get rid of it later. So, there's a whole bunch of clean ways we could do this. If the array was in order sorted, then we could do some tricks with that. But AA Web Dev brings up the simple way. That's what I was going to talk about just now, which is to go through the array, and for each item in the array, check and see if you've already seen that item before in the array. And if you haven't seen that item before, then add it to the new array. And if you have seen that item before, then remove it. So, how do we do that? Well, first off, let's create ourselves an array. And while we're here, let's also talk about the other way to create an array. So, if you know when you're creating the array exactly what's going to go in the array, you can create the array all in one go. By using curly brackets in this case. So, this bit of syntax is not one you've seen before. This bit of syntax creates a brand new integer array of size however many items I just wrote down, containing these items at the beginning. And this is a very nice way of declaring and initializing an array if you know what all the things in the array are going to be when you're creating it. Just don't have duplicates. How easy could that be? Okay. So, how are we going to do this? So, we need to figure out what all of the unique items in the array are. All the items that are not duplicates of each other. So, how are we going to do that? Well, first off, we're going to create a new array. And we're going to create a new array. This new array will store only the unique items of the array that has duplicates in it. How many unique items are there in the original array? We don't know. All of them could potentially be unique. Only one of them could be unique. We don't know. So in order to be safe, we create the new array as the same size as the old array, and just know that there's going to be blank space that we'll have to remove out later. And then we're going to go through the new array. And for each item in the original array, we want to check it against each item in the unique array and see if there's a match. And if there's no match, then we can add a new item into the duplicate array. But while we're here, we should figure out we should also keep track of how many unique numbers we have. Suvan is simultaneously trying hard and not trying hard at solving the remove duplicates problem. Isn't there a library for this? Seems like a common problem. There probably is, but that requires looking things up, and why would you look something up when you can just reinvent the wheel yourself? I'm joking. That's actually a terrible idea. Like, if there's a known solution to a common problem, it's usually a good idea to look up what that known solution to the common problem is. However, in the context of trying to learn things, reinventing the wheel is a good way of learning things. How to solve the problem? Step 1, pipe the output to a Python and pass it to a set. Okay. com.array deduplicator function. Well, that sounds like Java. There are many ways to remove duplicates from collections. Yes, there are. Such as using the set collection, which doesn't even allow you to put duplicates in to begin with. But we're not there. Like, let's solve it. Like, let's finish reinventing this wheel, and okay. I'm looking at where we are, like, for time-wise. We are currently at 1916, which means we've got about 15 minutes left in the lecture. So let's solve the removing duplicates from array problem, and then go into just pure form questions and answers. And to that end, I'm going to stop getting distracted. I'm going to stop getting distracted by chat for a minute because Suvan and AA Web Dev are just heckling me at this point. I laugh. Okay, so duplicate array, array containing duplicates, array containing uniques, number of uniques we found so far. For each item in the original array, we want to hold on to that item so that we can take a look at it. And then we also want to hold on to we need to know if the number in question is a unique number. If it's a unique number, we want to keep it. If it's not a unique number, then we can throw it away later. So, how do we know if the number is unique? Well, for each item in the current array of known unique numbers, we want to check and see if our new number is in that array somewhere. How to do that? One item at a time. So something I didn't mention earlier, but I should have mentioned, when we're playing with arrays, we basically have to play with the array one element at a time. There isn't really a logical way to say. There isn't really a logical way to work with every single item in an array all at once. So, for logic, you need to think of the array one item at a time. So, if the number we're looking at is equal to a number in the array of unique numbers, then we know we have found a number that's not unique, and thus we don't care about this number anymore. And because we don't care about this number anymore, because we found the number in the array, we found the number in the array of uniques, we know we don't need to look any further, so we can break out of this array. And if it turns out that it wasn't that one, then we just move on. So what if we get all the way to the end of this? What happens when we get all the way to the end of the list of uniques? Well, check and see if we're still unique. If we still have a unique number, then we want to take this number and put it into the array of uniques. And then we want to say that we found another unique number. Hash sets O of n. Reading chat. Loop through the array. Time complexity. Hash sets O of n. N squared complexity. Search. 2D arrays are just longer 1D arrays. If number is an array, number position isn't the same position as the current number, delete it. The ultimate programming, hash set, duplicates, best O of n, array quine. We're not doing quines! Okay, so go through the array, grab an item, go through the array of uniques, check if the item is unique. If it's not, break out. If it is, store it in the array of uniques. So this will give us an array containing all of the unique numbers from the original array, and then a bunch of zeros. And it'll also tell us how many unique numbers we found. So let's clean this up a little bit. We don't need all of this extra space. We don't need all the extra zeros. We only need a unique number of spaces in the array. So let's make a new array. Let's copy the actual content of the array of uniques into the trimmed array of uniques. And then let's print out the array. Let's hit the wrong button a whole bunch of times first, though. While we're at it, just to prove a point, let's also print out the other arrays as well. Array duplicates, array uniques trimmed. And also let's scroll up and comment out the 2D array stuff. Array with duplicates, array uniques, duplicates, duplicates. Now, let's see if I made anything silly. I did something silly. I forgot to put new lines in. Because everything wound up all on one line. Not so readable. Okay, so the original array 4,333,712,853,18171. So out of that, only the numbers 4,371,285 are unique. And then there's a whole bunch of then all the rest of these were not uniques and thus can be blank. And then for good form, we trim off all the extra zeros and we just keep the actual array of unique values. I'm not sure if we can say this is nice, though, because this array contains neither the numbers 6 nor 9. Okay. Questions with the bunch of lines of code that I just wrote, and that I'm going to need to go back and frantically add a ton of comments to later today. Or use functions. I mean, I guess. I did actually kind of want to talk about method signatures today. We are approaching the end of the lecture time, so the discussion of functions unfortunately looks like it's not going to happen today. But one-dimensional, two-dimensional arrays, clearing out duplicates from an array, that's all still legitimate content within the Java language that is a good thing, that are all good things to talk about. AA Web Dev thinks, how about tomorrow for something? I'm not sure if we're interested in doing multiple lectures in 1 week. Map filter reduced to avoid the for loops. If we're talking collections, yeah, but once again, not collections. Primitive arrays can be a little bit annoying to work with, but they you start working with primitive stuff, and then you move on to the more you move on to collections later on once you've Can you paste the code somewhere? Yes, the file of code that I'm working with right here is going to get processed a little bit by our people and uploaded as a PDF. Hopefully tomorrow, actually, or hopefully before tomorrow, actually. Basically, as soon as I write in a whole bunch of comments and a whole bunch of text, Java to PDF convert. Honestly, one of the admins has a bot for that, so I'm gonna pass this off to his bot and let him do it for me. I just need to add a ton of comments so that it actually makes sense. PDF? Because all the rest of our stuff's been updated, has been uploaded as PDF. It's gonna go in. It's gonna be the lecture 6 lecture notes. Yeah. Okay, web dev. I don't like HTML, okay? I really don't like CSS. JavaScript is great though, but don't worry, Java doesn't like you either. How to develop good comment etiquette. Self-documenting code in Perl. That's a good one, alright. I mean, technically speaking, HTML is not a programming language, but that's not something that I'm getting into right here. How to develop good comment etiquette. Oh, that's a good question, actually. So, my policy on comments is when I'm commenting, with the stuff I do comments for code in, start off every chunk of thing that I'm going to do with a couple of lines of summary of the purpose of what I'm going to do. What is the goal? What has to happen here? Not necessarily how it has to be done, but what's the input, what's the output, and what does it do? So for the stuff we were just doing down here with the removing duplicates from an array. Started off with one line, even just starting off with the comment of remove duplicate members of an array. And then after that, next question. How much detail do you want? Do you want a comment on every line, or do you want a comment on every on the purpose of every discrete thing? And when I upload the notes file for this, it's going to be it might wind up being a comment on every line because each line has a discrete thing to it. Unfortunately, I don't think I can talk and write comments at the same time, so I'm going to have to save that for the lecture notes file when it gets uploaded, and I think my voice is actually starting to burn out as well. We have hit the 1 hour, 30-minute duration of the scheduled lecture. We only actually covered arrays, but we covered a whole bunch of stuff about arrays, so looks like I was a bit overly ambitious in my plan to go and talk about 4 different things in one lecture. Let's look back over at the Discord list of the announcements file. Okay, so next week will be the week to talk about method signatures, static keyword, and the Java documentation pages, because the Java doc pages seem like an odd thing to talk about, but there's so much useful knowledge you can extract from them, and there's so many people who will just say, oh, read the docs. Wait, but how do you read the docs? How do I make it get through this mess of page? Okay, so that'll be next week. So, arrays, and okay. At some point within the next couple... So, at some point by tomorrow, lecture notes should get published. At some point within the next few days, the video recording of this lecture will get published. Basically, as soon as our editor gets his hands on it and chews it for a while. And then, hopefully, I'll have a homework file posted around the same time the lecture notes get posted tomorrow. And then after that, we will see where the Java class goes from here. Because, as I mentioned, Java kind of went a little bit inactive recently. Also related to that, is this a time zone that actually works for people? I know that obviously there's half a dozen or a dozen people who showed up to this lecture here at this point in peak European time zone. But, I know that we have people who... we have people who aren't European time zone. Yeah. At 5 a.m., 3:30 a.m. is, 3:30 a.m. is not the best time for some people. And, for me, it works because, I'm in California, USA, so it's, 11, 12 in the middle of the day for me, so this is a perfectly reasonable time for me, but... Yeah, so I'll look into I'll make post announcements about whether the 1800 would be a better time, or more closer to 000 or 0100 would be a better time for dealing with the the American time zones. But well, we'll see where that goes. Okay. I'm going to stop the recording at this point and call it a lecture on Java arrays, and stick around to the questions channel for a while before going to eat something because I'm hungry, and then say the word and a whole bunch more. Yeah, okay. Thanks for coming, everyone. I will see you all